Hey there, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday night recap episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. As you can probably tell, I am not your normal host, Robert Jameson Sylvester IV, but I am instead Dan Harris. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast since at least last season, then you know that this is our in-season schedule. We want to bring you guys our immediate fantasy takes on your drive into work on Monday or even before you go to bed on Sunday if you're a night owl and I don't accidentally erase it after recording. And Bobby's just unavailable on Sundays. So it's either the leather jacket, which I know you hate, or this. So I wore this ridiculous thing for you. That is a little My Cousin Vinny way to explain that I am the weird Alice in Wonderland suit that you buy at the secondhand clothes store in an emergency to Bobby's real nice suit that fits perfectly. You will get used to it, I promise. Now, Bobby, whose real name is not actually Robert Jameson Sylvester IV, to be clear, will do all the other shows during the week, not to worry about that. But the man who holds it all together, surely wearing his sweatsuit and hat, is still here. Mike Tagliere, you can find him on Twitter at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, are you ready to do this all over again this season or what?
I am absolutely ready, and I have no idea how it happened. Over the span of like the last 15 seconds, I think you became weirder than Bobby, and I really didn't know that was possible, Dan.
Well, first of all, Tags, as you may or may not know, because I realize we have a little divide now in our relationship. I mean, I hosted a solo baseball show every single night for like the first 4 months of the baseball season. And when you do that, you just kind of randomly need to entertain yourself. So you start talking in movie quotes like half the time. It's really weird. But in the end, it works for me. So I'm going to keep going with it. So look, we did this last year. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but night tags is really feisty. It's fun. He gets really worked up over things. He can't go to sleep the night. So it's going to be fun. Are you ready, Tags? I mean, it's a whole different universe here. You know that. Are you ready to go?
I am as ready as I will ever be.
That's really not encouraging to me. But anyway, let's go. Let's get ready to go. But before we get into it, I want to remind everyone that we've got a store now. I'm actually wearing my Paint It in Butter t-shirt right now to try to get into full on. Look, I've got to get into full on Bobby mode. Tags, what do you want from me? You guys make a perfect show. I just kind of want to hop on board. You guys can get shirts and water bottles and stuff for your kids and a ton more over there. Just go to shop.fantasypros.com. Again, that's shop.fantasypros.com. Go ahead, snoop around. All right, Baba Ganoush, we're going to get into some winners and losers here in a second, but let's first address some of the big injury news at the outset. Tyreek Hill injured his collarbone. Now, Ian Rappaport has tweeted out that it is expected to be a few-week injury and that he won't need surgery. Hill got knocked out early in the game against the Jaguars, and then all sorts of rumors were swirling about how serious it was because he went to the hospital. Now, let's assume that Rappaport is right here, and it's going to be a few weeks. First of all, what do you think the impact is overall on the Chiefs' offense?
It's not going to be a good one. We saw that actually trend downward with Patrick Mahomes in the second half. I don't know if many realize that he actually threw for over 300 yards in the first half alone. And then everything just kind of died down in the second half. They leaned more on the run. And granted, the game kind of got further and further away from Jacksonville at that point. They kind of imploded. And that's kind of what the Jaguars have done. We saw it last year. And it just it didn't take very long for Jacksonville to lose their emotions and like literally start taking things out, getting penalties thrown, getting kicked out of the game. Miles Jack, emotions sky high. That team is in disarray, but it was impressive to see what Patrick Mahomes did against that team in Jacksonville against a healthy Jacksonville defense that ultimately did implode. But it's not going to help, man. Tyreek Hill was kind of like the glue that separated that offense, right? Where it's like Alex Smith was a fine game manager before Tyreek Hill came along, and then all of a sudden Alex Smith was like a guy that was a potential MVP candidate. So while I'm not going to sit here and say that Patrick Mahomes is a guy that you consider benching because he's not, they are going to lose a lot of their upside.
So are you saying that we shouldn't expect 9 catches for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns from Sammy Watkins every week like he had today?
You know what's funny is that's one of my takeaways from today. Obviously, you know, when we're talking about risers and fallers, one of the biggest risers is Sammy Watkins. And, you know, some people are going to be, sell high on Sammy Watkins. I'm not one of those people. I think he's a hold right now. I don't think you need to go out and buy him because people are going to charge too much to acquire him. But I also don't think you need to sell him either because with Tyreek Hill out for multiple weeks, Sammy Watkins, what he did today against AJ Boye and Jalen Ramsey was ridiculous. You know, Jalen Ramsey was trying to hold him on the third touchdown that he scored, and Watkins kind of gave his own shove on that. But it just goes to show that was against the best cornerback in the NFL. In my opinion, Jalen Ramsey is that guy. He beat him. And Sammy Watkins was healthy throughout the entire training camp, throughout the entire preseason. He looked fantastic today. Nobody could keep up with him. And this is a guy that was drafted in the first round, a guy that posted over 1,000 yards with Tyrod Taylor as his quarterback. So I talked about this on our podcast, a couple weeks ago. I tried to bring it up with multiple guests, just saying that, is there a scenario where we all look back and say, how did we not draft Sammy Watkins higher? Because he is the number 2 option for Patrick Mahomes as a wide receiver anyways. And now, he's the number 1.
Yeah, I don't know if you were specifically pointing that out, but I was the guest on that podcast, actually, when we were saying, are we going to look back at this? And I said, no way. I mean, not that I doubted Watkins and his ability to succeed necessarily in that offense, but just that I didn't think that we would look back and be like, man, we really missed something. What was wrong with us here? But he obviously has an absolutely huge performance. And that was even when Hill was in the game. It wasn't just like Hill went out and then all of a sudden he took over. A monstrous effort. As for Mahomes, I will say one thing about this. He did injure his ankle, and not bad enough. He looked bad when it first happened. He was kind of, he needed to be helped off the field, and then he wound up not even missing a play, I don't believe, because of a delay. And so I'm wondering whether or not part of the downturn in the Chiefs offense in the second half was also in part due to that. So that's fair to think about. All right, on the other side of the ball, in that same game, Nick Foles fractured his clavicle. He is having surgery. There's no timetable yet, but Tags, I assume you have to assume that this is going to be most, if not all, of the season, right?
Yeah, he's going to be out for a long time. We've seen collarbones. I mean, I would assume it's at least 8 weeks. And, if Jacksonville's out of it by them, do they rush him back? Gardner Minshew, is he someone that we're really going to be talking about? So,
I mean, legitimately, his performance was crazy. 22 of 25 for 275 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 interception. Now, they were pretty well behind for the most part. I mean, Foles left early when the game was still competitive, so Minshew was able to do that. But is this a significant downgrade? Because, pretty much everyone on the Jaguars, Fournette, not a huge game or anything, but they were mostly playing from behind. But you had touchdowns for Chark, you had a touchdown for Westbrook. Is this something where you think it's a significant downgrade on the Jaguar side of the ball?
Yes, it's a downgrade. I didn't think that Nick Foles was much of an upgrade from Blake Bortles. Bobby and I have talked about that in the show. I didn't think that Foles was, I just don't think that he's like a guy that's a game changer. I don't think that he's someone who's going to elevate the players around him. Don't forget that they played a weak secondary today. The Chiefs secondary is one of the worst in the NFL, and they were starting a rookie safety today too. Their cornerback unit is weak. We kind of knew that coming in, and they're also going through a scheme change. They were a 3-4 team going to a 4-3. So there were a lot of moving parts in that Chiefs defense. DJ Chark is a guy where it's like, if you land him on the waiver wire, I would highly suggest you sell if you could find someone to do that. Chris Conley's not someone that I would grab. D.D. Westbrook, it is what it is with him. He scored a touchdown, salvaged his fantasy day, but I'm not buying this Jaguars offense moving forward. Leonard Fournette's the only one I want, and even Fournette, it was a little disappointing because if the defense isn't going to be as good as maybe we had hoped it would be, like I didn't anticipate going back to 2017 Jaguars defense, but a very, very competent above average defense. I expected that, and we didn't even get that today. And so if they can't do that, Leonard Fournette isn't going to get the carries needed in order to be an RB1. Today he only had 13 carries. He caught the ball 4 times, but man, this is ugly.
I do think, though, that the catches are worth talking about, right? If he's going to get 6 targets for the game, and they were behind, so again, that was part of it. But if he, if the defense isn't as good, and again, it's week 1, okay? Let's not draw too many conclusions, and it's against the Chiefs, who were a borderline unstoppable last year.
Yeah.
But if the whole point, that there was a lot of talk about Fournette being more involved in the passing game, even if I know I don't want to get too into this because we'll get into the games individually later, but if he is going to be more involved in the passing game, like they sort of suggested, and like he was this game, don't you think he's going to be able to salvage his value even if the defense isn't as strong?
Well, yeah, and that's part of the reason I liked Fournette. People underestimate him because we did a fantasy feud segment on basically players that you would draft in standard but not in PPR, and I said, and one of my guesses, I said Leonard Fournette's going to be on there, but he shouldn't be. And sure enough, people voted for Leonard Fournette. Fournette has caught a lot of passes when he's been on the field. I think that's like an undervalued portion of his game. Like the Jaguars believe that he can catch passes. So that was kind of built into it, but it's more about the competency of the offense, right? And first off, they were missing Cam Robinson today. So their offensive line already started with missing their starting left tackle. So they were starting 2 tackles today that had a combined 0 starts in the NFL, 0 snaps, as a matter of fact. It was always going to be a rough day for Fournette, but I mean, to see him get 5.1 yards per carry, it's fine. But again, the state of this offense, I want as little of it as I can possibly have.
I mean, I think that's fair. And, we live in a world where when you lose Nick Foles, your entire offense kind of goes to the heck. And that's just a weird place that I did not expect to be in if you had asked me like 3 years ago. But,
yeah.
All right, buddy, we're going to get into some winners and losers here. But before we do, Tags, I know you, like I do, love sports memorabilia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever it's time to add something to our man caves, I know Tags and I both go to the same place. And that place is Pristine Auction. Guys, listen to this for a second, okay? Because this is how I came across it. The first time I ever used Pristine Auction, I wanted to get something for my grandfather's birthday. He is a huge baseball fan, and he lives in Chicago, so I was just browsing the site looking at the daily auctions, and suddenly there was this signed Yoan Moncada jersey. He is a young stud second baseman for the White Sox, well, now third baseman, going for like $35. I put in a bid, I won it, it arrived at my door a few days later, and now I am back in his will. I mean, so he says, I can't really trust a White Sox fan, but I'm going to go on it. Anyway, since then, I'm basically on Pristine Auction every single day. And I kind of expected that price to be an outlier, but it is really not. They have a ton of daily auctions every single day. And because they have so many, there are always these amazing deals. I mean, yesterday I saw an Alvin Kamara signed jersey go for $58.50 and a Devontae Adams signed football for $63.88. Every item at Pristine Auction is guaranteed from only the most trusted sources. It's free to register and it's free to bid, and you only pay money when you win an item. So go to pristineauction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com and use our registration code FantasyPros in the registration field when you sign up. You'll get a free $5 credit. And Pristine Auction also has been a supporter of the show for a really long time, including providing the items for our monthly contests. And we were giving away a signed Alvin Kamara helmet from Pristine Auction, and that winner will be announced tomorrow. But our prize for this month also comes from Pristine Auction, and it is a really good one. It's an Antonio Brown signed Raiders helmet, which now immediately becomes a collector's item. Just go to fantasypros.com/contest for details on how to enter. But spoiler alert, it is leaving a review for the show on iTunes or Stitcher and sending a screenshot of that review to contest@fantasypros.com. All right, Tags, let's get into our winners and losers from the day. Give me one winner that you were really excited about.
Oh, well, Sammy Watkins was definitely a winner for me. But one other one I'm going to mention that a lot of people are going to say, why? It's Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders did not finish with a great fantasy game. And I'm not going to sit here and throw out John Ross or people like that because, those are obvious. They had bigger weeks than people expected. But I'm talking about Miles Sanders because you look at the snap count between him and Jordan Howard. He played 35 snaps. Jordan Howard played just 14 snaps. To know 35 steps in his first game, even though he did not start, even though the game script went, in the wrong direction, I believe that this team is going to be a high-scoring offense. I think they drafted him in the second round for a reason. He is the guy that they want to handle the ball. There was no fumble. And again, you look at his final line and you're not impressed with it. But what you don't see in that is if you didn't see the game, I think it was a 20+ yard run that was called back due to a phantom holding penalty. It was like a flop that there really wasn't a hold, but they called it. And it was crap because Miles Sanders should have had a long touchdown run. He is the most electric running back in that backfield. And, knowing that Carson Wentz looks good, knowing DeSean Jackson looks healthy, that he can stretch the field, you could say DeSean Jackson's another winner as well. But there's just a lot of things to like about this offense. You want to tie yourselves to running backs that, lead a timeshare in high-scoring offenses, and Miles Sanders is that guy.
You nailed it with your first sentence, which was, I did not expect Miles Sanders to be one of your winners today because his official line, 11 carries for 25 yards, of course, is not something that you get excited about. Well, let me ask you something. You mentioned Jordan Howard, and he got a lot of his stuff late, 6 carries, 44 yards. But what about Sproles? He got 9 carries also for 47 yards. Do you think that Sanders, as good as he is really going to be able to separate himself, even though Sproles is still there getting plenty of work in that backfield?
Yeah, this was a game where they obviously fell behind, and it was one of the biggest surprises of the week, where I'm sitting there watching this game and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What is happening here? It was 20-7 at one point. And then so naturally Darren Sproles, probably one of the better pass catching backs in the NFL, was out on the field more than he probably will be in the future weeks. I don't anticipate the Eagles falling behind in many games like they did this week. So will it start to even itself out? Yes. But knowing that even though that's the way that the game script went, even though this team didn't total as many rushing attempts as they did last year against this the same Washington offense or defense, there's a lot to like about Miles Sanders. Again, like the results may not have been there, but you have to look at the fundamentals and the snap counts. And Miles Sanders was basically a guy that he approached 40 snaps. Like the only running back that's ever totaled more than 42 snaps for Doug Peterson is Darren Sproles. And Sproles is a guy they let him sit out there in free agency. I thought he was going to retire. I mean, granted, he can still play, and I think we saw that today. But Miles Sanders, I think there's enough room for Sproles to contribute as a third down back and Miles Sanders to be the primary guy.
Well, I think it's great that you're pointing it out because I guarantee you that fantasy owners are going to look at this and be like, oh, no, I can't believe I have Miles Sanders at this point. He's in a 3-way timeshare. You know, his numbers don't look overly impressive. So as you're pointing out, if you can go in there and you can make a buy low offer for Sanders, which I'm sure you can in many leagues, sounds like Tags is recommending that you do that. So, I do the trade charts every week. And again, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure I'll get questions because he will be moving up the trade chart based almost entirely on what you're saying. Okay, you want to give a second winner, or I will allow you, if you want, to just take Sammy Watkins and move on to our losers.
Yeah, I'll take those two. Those are good for me because, again, this is a week not to overreact too much. Like, there's so many people I see out there on social media right now, like they boast about the people that they're right about, but they don't talk about the people they're wrong about. You know, just as you don't want to overreact to someone's bad performance, you don't want to overreact to a good performance. So it's just like I want to remain even keel this week. I don't want to overreact to just one good or bad performance.
You can't take victory laps in September, man. That's like one of the major things that you remember whenever you're making picks. And in baseball, we say, you can't take victory laps in April because things change really quickly. And week one, it's going to be a distant memory very shortly. All right, but I will make you give me two losers. Who's your first one?
Yeah, Todd Gurley is the first one. And another one, people might not be expecting that, but he's a loser in my book just because he's a guy that while I didn't expect the same workload that he got last year, I still did expect him to get like 18 touches per game. And it seems like that's not going to happen. They do want Malcolm Brown to be involved. Darrell Henderson only got, I think, 1 touch today, but this is clearly going to be a timeshare. And Todd Gurley losing goal line carries to Malcolm Brown, who, by the way, Malcolm Brown looked fantastic today.
11 carries for 53 yards. Yeah, he wasn't a slouch.
Todd Gurley is kind of coasting along, and I don't know if it's the knee. I don't know if there's something more. I don't know. I can't explain it. But knowing that he had the entire offseason to rest up, knowing that he didn't play at all in the preseason, that this is the week one. This is the week that he was going to be most fresh. It was a close game throughout. It wasn't like it was a blowout and they just wanted to take it easy on Gurley. This was a very close game that they could have lost. Todd Gurley, he's a big loser for me. I've moved him down outside of my top 15 running backs. I think that he's still in the RB2 conversation because some of those touchdowns are going to fall his way in the future, but he's not a guy that you could just plug into your lineup and expect production every single week.
Now, he did, to be fair, he did gain 97 yards on 14 carries. So, he ran well when he was in there, but yeah, he
also ran out of bounds instead of he had a one-on-one to beat the guy. And if he had beat the defender in on this long run that he had, I can't remember who it was that he was approaching. I think it was a safety. He was approaching in the open field. And basically if he beat that one guy, he was gone for a touchdown and he ran out of bounds. That's not something that Todd Gurley probably would have done, a year ago.
Let's just be honest. You hate Todd Gurley. It's very clear from this discussion. I think that's fine. And he's probably being careful and they're being careful with him. But yeah, if he's going to get 14 carries and Brown's going to see 11 carries, including the goal line ones, then that's going to significantly cut into Gurley's value for sure. All right. How about number two? Loser number two.
Geronimo Allison. I know this is back from a Thursday night game. And again, I don't want to overreact to one game, but this is all about the snap counts and what we saw and what we didn't see. What we did see was that Marquez Valdez-Scantling is the number 2 wide receiver in Green Bay. And we saw that Geronimo Allison, he played 30 snaps. That's not going to get it done. He had 0 targets. And that's a problem because he's in a new offensive system. I did believe that Aaron Rodgers would start, he might target him in the slot. He had rapport with Geronimo Allison, and knowing that it was a game that he struggled in, like Aaron Rodgers was rusty. People talk about Trubisky, but what they overlook is that Aaron Rodgers was very, very bad in that game. But he didn't look to guys that he was comfortable with. He was pushing the ball. He threw it up to Jimmy Graham in a one-on-one situation. The ball that Marquez Valdez-Scantling caught was a floater that was wildly underthrown. But not seeing any targets is a problem. Like on the other side of the field, Anthony Miller, he was somebody that was coming back from an ankle injury.
They were easing him in, right? They were easing Miller in.
He only played 15 snaps. Tariq Cohen essentially played the slot role for the Bears last week. So there's reasons why Anthony Miller, you could say, okay, maybe that's why he didn't produce. But as for Geronimo Allison, he's healthy. He's been on the field. He's been practicing with the team. It's worrisome, and he's someone that I've definitely moved down, far, far down my rest of season rankings.
Is he droppable?
He is, depending on who's out there. I wouldn't drop him for someone like a Paul Richardson or even like a Terry McLaurin. I wouldn't drop him for those guys because I think we've seen the best game of Terry McLaurin's 2019 season already this year. And I know that's not saying, I mean,
that's not a bold prediction, Dax. I mean, that's
125 yards and a touchdown, but I don't want to tie myself to offenses like that. I'd rather stash someone like Allison, whereas if there was an injury to, say, Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Devontae Adams, you're going to walk into a guy that's going to be back into that top 36 wide receiver conversation.
All right, so since you're talking about Allison, you kind of led to a perfect transition into our actual game-by-game discussion. So let us start with Thursday night. As much as I know you will hate to discuss it, let's bomb through it briefly because, it's Thursday night already. It's old news. People really want to hear about what happened on Sunday. But Packers 10, Bears 3. You broke down the wide receiver snap count and everything like that. I did want to talk about that. So let's briefly break down both backfields here. Okay, let's start with your Bears. David Montgomery, he gets 7 touches. He's 38% of the snaps. Mike Davis, there's 11 touches, 56% of the snaps. Tyreek Cohen, as you mentioned, 70% of the snaps and gets 8 catches on 10 targets, but no carries, or he was going to get a carry on that first one before he fumbled and they blew it back. So what are you doing here with the Bears backfield? How are you feeling in particular about Montgomery?
I'm going to buy Montgomery because I think that a lot of people are panicking on him. They may have spent like a 3rd or 4th round pick on him and they're saying, oh my God, I screwed this up. And, after that first week, yes. And this is something that we talked about in the podcast as well, where I said Montgomery was going too high. It wasn't accounting for the risk in Mike Davis. It wasn't accounting for the risk in Tyreek Cohen and the roles that they would have. I think he's a buy now, though, because you're going to be able to get him for much cheaper. I also think Tyreek Cohen is a sell because basically if Anthony Miller's on the field in a full-time role, Tyreek Cohen's snap count disappears in the passing game. Like, he's not getting 10 targets if Anthony Miller's in the field for his normal snap count. And then you have Mike Davis.
Out of curiosity, before you keep going, when Miller gets healthy, do you think Cohen, though, gets more out of the backfield and that hurts Montgomery at all? Do you think Cohen's basically going to get phased out or what?
To be honest, Cohen shouldn't get more out of the backfield. I mean, he should get some carries. He's kind of like a Darren Sproles type running back where it's like you want to use him in space. You want to figure out ways to do that. If it's a pitch, you use him on a draw play or something like that. He is shifty in the open field, but you need him to go against light fronts. You can't put him in your base offense and expect him to rush for 5 yards per carry. He's a guy that on NFL's next gen stats, he runs more yards than anyone else in the NFL in order to gain a yard. Last year, that number was, I think, close to 5 yards. He ran 5 yards to gain a yard on average, which is just crazy. That should never happen. But that's who he is, and that's why he's not going to get a lot of carries. I think he's a guy that's capped at like 5 to 7 carries per game. So most of the time the Bears they're not going to be running the ball. They only ran it with their running backs 11 times in this game. That's not going to happen very often. This was a poorly planned game by Matt Nagy. The Packers too. Matt LaFleur, this was like one of the worst coach games I've ever seen.
The play calling was abysmal for almost throughout the entire thing.
Like, the room for optimism on the Bears side is that Matt Nagy showed last year that he was able to get it done. This was a top 12 scoring offense, and they should bounce back. I think he just got a little too cute. I think Trubisky was terrible, locking onto his first read. I think this stems from them not playing in the preseason, and it's dumbfounding, like why that even happened considering what we saw in the field. But then going over to the Packers side, we didn't see Rodgers in the preseason. They didn't play their starters much, so it could have been some rust there. But Matt LaFleur, this looked like the same crappy offense they had in Tennessee last year, and it's the reason that I said, why did Matt LaFleur get a head coaching job? I thought it was a terrible hire when it happened, and that game definitely didn't change anything, in my opinion, on Matt LaFleur as a play caller.
Yeah, that game was really just hard to watch, frankly. If it wasn't, opening night, it would have been really tough. Let's look on the other side, though. Sticking with the running backs, about a 60-40 split here in terms of snaps for Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Are you concerned? Is this going to be the thing? Or was this, I know Jones got knocked out briefly for a little bit of time, but are you concerned here for Jones?
Nope, I'm buying Aaron Jones. Looking at the Packers defense, that Packers defense did look good, and we knew that they had a lot of new pieces added to that team. And if they are like an actual competent defense and can get pressure on the quarterback and have a decent back end with Savage, the cornerbacks, like if they take a step forward, because they have a lot of young cornerbacks in that team that they've spent high draft equity on. If they do step forward and that defense is decent, we're going to see Aaron Jones a lot, because he was the guy that was clearly the 1 and 2 down back. When they were in clear-cut passing downs, it seemed like Jamal Williams is the preferred option, where it's like if they're in like a no-huddle, like 2-minute offense, they might have Jamal Williams on the field more than Aaron Jones. But you can clearly see when Jones is in the game, like he's shot out of a cannon and he just like hits the hole as fast as possible. Whereas Jamal Williams is just a guy. He's the definition of just a guy. Don't panic over Aaron Jones 3 yards per carry. It was against the Chicago Bears. That defensive front is just nasty. The Bears defense looked fantastic, but offensive game planning was terrible. But yeah, Aaron Jones, if you can buy him on the cheap right now, if you can get him for like I mean, Marlon Mack had a really big game, and that's why I don't know if I want to go that far. It's something I need to kind of reevaluate. But if you can trade away someone like a Mark Ingram or a Derrick Henry in order to get Aaron Jones, I would do it.
I like it. I'm on board with all that. All right, let's get into Sunday's games. But before we do, I do want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's show, FanDuel. Look, week 1 is in the book, so you are stuck with your teams for the rest of the season for better or worse. Your team has to deal with a bunch of injuries, or you drafted some busts, like you're just out of luck. That is, of course, unless you play daily fantasy sports on FanDuel. No matter how many season-long leagues you are in, there's really nothing better than picking a new team each week, trying to strategize around which players might be under-owned or represent good values. I mean, week 1 is not even done yet. I'm still watching the Cardinals and Lions game on right now, but I'm already thinking about next week's lineup. I'm sure I'm going to have a little Michael Gallup against the Redskins and certainly some Devin Singletary against the Giants, who we will talk about later. I play it every week. It is easy. It is fun. And this year, there are more ways to win than ever, and you can win millions of dollars, literally. And now FanDuel is offering a great promotion to new users. You can get $20 in site credits when you deposit $20 or more. And it's actually even cooler this year because you'll get an extra $5 in site credits every week for 4 weeks. To get this great offer, just go to FanDuel.com/FantasyPros. That's FanDuel.com/FantasyPros. All right, Tags, let's get it started. Titans 43, Browns 13. Not exactly what we expected here, at least I didn't. The Browns actually took on the largest number of bets to win the Super Bowl and Mayfield for MVP, so that's off to an auspicious beginning. But let's start with the Titans here. I mean, Derrick Henry, 19 carries, 84 yards on the ground with a score, 1 catch for 75 yards and a touchdown. I could not bring myself to just remotely buy into what happened, but are your concerns with him gone? Are we looking at the last 4 games of 2018 Derrick Henry here?
No. This one is weird, right? So I just want to start by saying at the top, because I watched this whole game. So basically the way my man cave set up, I can watch 4 games, and this was one of the games I chose to watch. Like, I watched the entire game, and I think that Baker Mayfield was concussed at the end of the first half, and I think that's why he looked like crap in the second half. I just want to say that, and if you go back and watch, they passed it off as like it was a wrist injury or something like that. I think that he was helmet-to-helmet hit, and then he went to the ground, and his arm went limp once he hit the ground, and I think that he was actually knocked out for a moment, and I think that could have screwed with his performance in the second half, because he looked like a different quarterback, turning the ball over on 3 consecutive performances. As for Derrick Henry, he's someone I wrote up in the primer saying that, you never want to play him when the Titans are going to lose the game. Like, they were underdogs in this game, pretty big. I think it was 6-point underdogs in this game.
Yeah, 5.5.
So yeah, unless you thought the Titans were going to win, he was someone that I didn't even want to play. Like, I had him as like an upside RB3. And when I say upside RB3, it's because Derrick Henry is the type of guy that could take legitimately, they could be on their own 25-yard line. He could take a 75-yard play to the house. And that's exactly what he did on the one reception that he caught. He caught 1 ball, so I'm not confident that he's going to be used so much more in the passing game. It was 1 screen play that he was used on. He did punch in a touchdown. He's going to be frustrating. He's going to be a guy that in wins, this was a blowout win, it turned out to be. He was obviously very useful, but in games where Tennessee is going to lose, which it's part of our job to do that. And honestly, that's on us if we think that Tennessee's going to lose, but odds makers kind of make that, they set that up to say they're expected to lose.
The one thing though, Tags, that I'll say, it's not like Henry was pouring this on when the Titans were way ahead or anything. I mean, the final score was lopsided, but the game was close for a lot of it.
Yeah, for the first half, it was very close.
Right. Yeah. So I do think he was getting some work. I think it's fair to say, even, when the game was close. I mean, I guess if they are going to get blown out, of course, that's something, but yeah, I mean, I think that's all fair. Let's just go through. Delaney Walker catches 2 touchdowns and A.J. Brown with a huge game. But the guy I really want to ask you about is Corey Davis. 3 targets, no catches. Is Corey Davis droppable?
No, he's not droppable. He's actually someone that I would probably try and buy if you can get him for one of your bench players. I would do that because he is the best receiver on the Titans roster, and we knew that this was going to be a tough matchup coming in. Denzel Ward is no joke. He's drawn comparisons to Darrelle Revis, and as we know, people went on Revis Island, they disappeared. Top name wide receivers. Corey Davis was never a guy that I wanted to trust on week in, week out basis. Like, he was more of like a wide receiver 4 that could maybe live up to top 24 wide receiver upside if Marcus Mariota started throwing the ball, better than he did last year. And I know that Mariota, walked away with, 248 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, but he didn't look very good in this game. A lot of the stuff was done after the catch with both A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. Delaney Walker did a lot after the catch. So most of the stuff that Mariota did get in this game was done after the catch. So I don't want to give him all the credit. So there's going to be ups and downs with Corey Davis. But again, he is the best wide receiver on the team. There's value to be had in that. And this was just a very, very tough matchup.
All right, let's switch sides to the Brown side of the ball. You mentioned Mayfield. He does have the 3 picks. He throws for 285 yards and a touchdown. Nobody really does anything spectacular. Nick Chubb rushes for 74 yards. Beckham gets 71 yards. Landry 67 yards. Njoku gets 37 yards and a touchdown. Anything you really want to take away here in a tough matchup for the Browns offense?
No, just knowing that Odell Beckham got 11 targets is pretty big for his potential. I mean, at halftime, like I said, when Baker was dealing with that, I want to say that Beckham had 6 catches for 58 or 59 yards. So, I mean, it was really good when Baker was throwing the ball well. The second half, just everything fell apart for that team. I think there's going to be much better days for the Browns offense, and it really sucks that they still have not won an opening day game since I think it's, 2004, which is just... That's insane. There's no way to explain that outside of just out of this world insane. But Odell Beckham's going to be fine. Jarvis Landry looked good. And David Njoku, as we mentioned throughout the offseason, he's going to see a lot more linebackers in coverage. So this was a tough matchup. The Titans were one of the best teams in the NFL against defending tight ends last year. So to see him walk away with 4 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown, it's actually a pretty good thing.
All right, let's move on to the blowout of the day. Ravens 59, Dolphins 10. I mean, sometimes you think a game's going to kind of unfold one way, and it unfolds exactly the way you would think. Lamar Jackson, though, 17 of 20, 324 yards, and 5 touchdowns through the air. Only 6 rushing yards, though, so his owners are probably a little disappointed. I mean, is this all the Dolphins? Or is Lamar Jackson going to be a week in, week out, solid QB1 or what?
This is your sell high opportunity for everyone involved. Again, this is another game I watched because I had one of my buddies came over for the noon games and he was watching. He's a Dolphins fan, and I was laughing throughout the game. I'm sorry, man, this is brutal. And towards the end, it was oh, they got their backups in. I'm like, what's the difference? Legitimately, the players that the Dolphins are starting are backups on most teams. They looked lost. Lamar Jackson, 17 of 20 passing. He threw a touchdown every 4 pass attempts. A perfect 158.3 rating. If you go back and watch this game, you'll see what I mean. They don't get any pressure up front. Their front seven is one of the worst. It's one of the worst I've ever seen, to be honest. And their secondary, while they have some talent, they can only hang with players for so long. And there's some speed back there, and that's why we saw Marquise Brown, catch 4 balls for 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. But
what are your thoughts on him, by the way? I mean, that
sell. And the reason I said did you know, Dan, he played 12 snaps.
I didn't actually have the snap count. No, I didn't know that.
He played 12 snaps. Marquise Brown. The thing is, I was someone who was pimping out Marquise Brown this offseason. I was buy him. I compared him to someone like DeSean Jackson. That's the type of player he is. But this team is not going to be a pass-first team. They're not going to play the Dolphins every week, sadly. And Marquise Brown, he's going to be a guy that he's going to have fantasy-relevant performances, but knowing when to kind of expect them is going to be a different story. So he's a sell.
I think that is fair. Everybody pretty much on the Ravens has a great game. So try not to just take it for what it is. On the other side of the ball, everyone has a terrible day. Is there anything you want to talk about here on the Dolphins side of the ball? Are we avoiding all Dolphins in fantasy for the rest of the season or what?
Yeah, I think avoid them all. I avoid them all.
I mean, Kenyon Drake had 4 carries for 12 yards and 2 catches for 15 yards. I mean,
Kalen Ballage, 5 carries for -1 yard. Kalen Ballage is not good at football. I don't know why Brian Flores doesn't see that. I really don't care what's going on with Kenyon Drake. He gives you the best chance to win, but they don't want to win. I think they've made that very clear. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good thing for Devontae Parker that he had 75 yards against the Ravens secondary, which is probably the deepest in the NFL. Yeah, man, this team is not going to provide very much fantasy relevance.
All right, so I think what you're saying then is that we should probably start our New England skill players next week against them. So everybody take that pickup. If Tom Brady or somebody's on your waiver wire, go ahead and pick them up.
Well, if there's one thing that Miami has going for them next week, is that Brian Flores, obviously the defensive coordinator for the Patriots the last few years, he's someone that he knows the Patriots very well.
I'm sure he'll be able to stop them, no problem. Absolutely, he'll be able to shut them down, no problem. Bills 17, Jets 16. So in case you have not experienced it before, this is what a Jets game looks and feels like. It is a 3-step process of, hey, you know what? These guys ain't so bad, followed by a missed field goal or some other opportunity where you think, man, I really hope that doesn't come back to bite them, followed by a late collapse and an inevitable defeat. So on the bright side, though, you know that going in, so you don't get too worked up with it. But let's start with the Bills here. Josh Allen, a little sluggish at the start, but eventually finishes with a pretty nice game, 24 of 37 for 254 yards and a touchdown through the air, plus 38 yards rushing with a score. Now, he did have 3 turnovers here, but I mean, is he, QBs are whatever, they're all, a lot of them are just kind of indistinguishable, but do you think he's a borderline starter each week?
No, I don't trust Josh Allen as far as I can throw him, and that's not very far. This offense is just not going to be very good. I mean, I know that some people are excited about him. If you watch this game, you could see why Josh Allen, he's not a guy that I've ever liked. And John Brown, fortunately, dude, 10 targets, catch 7 of them for 123 yards and a touchdown. Josh Allen does have an arm to get the ball down the field, and that's always a positive, for those big plays that we're looking for. But Man, if you do play Josh Allen, all I suggest is that you don't watch him play.
He's so inaccurate. It is mind-boggling. He's just constantly behind guys. It's really it's not pretty to watch. But you know what is pretty to watch? Devin Singletary. 4 carries for 70 yards, 5 catches on 6 targets for 28 yards. Frank Gore ran 11 carries for just 20 yards. I mean, what is Singletary going forward here? Are you getting pretty excited? He was I believe the 38th running back in ADP off the board. I mean, do you think he can be a reliable RB2 in, let's say, half PPR formats?
I do not. I believe that Frank Gore is...
So you're such a downer, Tags. You're killing everybody, man. I was excited by this one. Go ahead.
I don't attach myself to bad offenses, and I don't think the Bills are going to be like a high-powered offense. Devin Singletary, obviously, he was good on his per-touch efficiency numbers, and he's looked good when he's gotten some time, but Frank Gore doesn't sign to not play a role. Frank Gore is he had a crappy day today. The Jets front is not an easy one to go against. And Devin Singletary, a lot of his numbers came in the second half when teams were a little bit more beaten down, like he was fresh coming out of the field. I'd be curious to see how he works in a bigger role, but it's a very small sample size that I don't want to judge Devin Singletary on. But again, this team, I just don't see them scoring very many points. And this is the reason I'm not excited about Josh Allen, is because 90% of QB1s come from teams that are top 18 in scoring. Over the past, I think it's the last 7 years, Dan, there is one quarterback that was from that finished as a QB1 from a bottom 10 scoring offense, which is what I view the Bills as. They're a bottom 10 scoring offense. So it's follow the points, and I just don't think this team generates enough points for me to rely on someone consistently.
All right, on the other side of the ball for the Jets, pretty solid debut for Le'Veon Bell. Robbie Anderson, quiet a little bit. Darnold overthrew him on a wide open bomb. But, I mean, Jamison Crowder, 17 targets, 14 catches, 99 yards. The slot role usually works well in Adam Gase's offense. I mean, is this a guy who's going to be a reliable, let's say, wide receiver 3, or even, can creep up a little higher than that in PPR leagues here with Crowder?
Crowder had the best matchup on the field, knowing Tre'Davious White was going to be covering Robbie Anderson dealing with a calf injury. There were a lot of things that benefited Crowder on top of the fact that Chris Herndon is dealing with his suspension right now. There were a lot of things that benefited him. However, the slot receiver is very important to Adam Gase and in his scheme, and we've seen that over the last couple of years. So Crowder is going to be fantasy relevant, and he was one of those guys that was during the offseason, you see him wide receiver 80 something and ECR, and I was like, I have him at 55, and I felt like I was low, but I'm like, am I wrong on him? It was one of those things that forces you to question yourself. But when I was going through this game and I seen 14 receptions on 17 targets, I was like, Jesus, wow. This one was one of those games where I was looking on and off from. It was just a very boring football game. So, but Crowder, geez, I don't know how you overlook that. But yeah, he's a guy that, especially in PPR formats, I think you could rely on for a borderline wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a pretty decent floor, low ceiling type of play that you can probably throw in there, particularly in PPR leagues every week. Eagles 32, Redskins 27. We talked about this game a lot at the outset, so let's just briefly talk about the receivers for the Eagles. DeSean Jackson, 10 targets, you mentioned him, 8 catches, 154 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Alshon Jeffrey, 6 targets, 5 catches, 49 yards, and a touchdown, plus what goes down as a rushing touchdown for 2 yards. So thoughts on what we can expect from either or both of these guys going forward?
Yeah, I did a few of these fantasy celebrity eliminator leagues this offseason where I play against some followers to donate money to charity with the buy-ins. And someone asked me in that chat earlier today if they should have started DeSean Jackson or Robbie Anderson. And I said I'd go with DeSean Jackson. I felt like him against the Washington, if there's someone that wants to stick to that old team, I think it's DeSean. And to know that he was questionable for this game when he broke a finger, but it was on his non-dominant hand. It was his ring finger. So I thought he'd play through it. And he's a guy that only needs one play to kind of, show up. It was really worrisome to see Carson Wentz start as slow as he did. But again, this is someone who didn't play in the preseason. So they did have a very slow start. The Eagles only scored 7 points in the first half of this game. But they turned things around, and DeSean Jackson and him obviously click on that deep ball. So seeing him get 10 targets is massive. And it's going back to Tampa Bay, right? Him and Jameis Winston could never connect on that deep ball. But when Ryan Fitzpatrick came in the game, DeSean Jackson was a guy that you could rely on for wide receiver 3 production most weeks, and he'd give you some spurts of production, maybe not even this big, but wide receiver 2 type performances. Knowing that he got 10 targets in the first game with Carson Wentz is massive. So DeSean Jackson is someone who moved up my board significantly with this performance.
100% agree. I was trying kind of to not buy in as much as I could, just because I never want to buy into DeSean Jackson, even last year. But I do think it's time. I do think that the targets really, I mean, that's what it is. If he's going to see 10 targets, that's doesn't strike me as a one-off. I think that's going to be sort of his target share, maybe not that high, but it's going to be relatively consistent going forward. On the other side of the ball, the Redskins, you mentioned Terry McLaurin, of course, 7 targets, 5 catches, 125 yards and a touchdown. Darius Geis gets the role to himself and really does nothing with it. Gains just 18 yards on 10 carries with another 20 yards through the air. Anything here on the Redskins?
Adrian Peterson is droppable. They had him as a healthy scratch for this game. I don't think it helps that Trent Williams is out. That's not going to help their offensive line. Darius Geis, it was a tough matchup against Philly. I don't want to sit here and pound on the guy, but this is, again, it's another offense that you really, I don't know if Washington scores 27 points the rest of the season. They probably do. I mean, do they have the Dolphins on their schedule? Because they might do it then.
I believe they do, yes.
But, Darius Geis is at least he's a guy that if Adrian Peterson's going to be inactive, Chris Thompson's going to steal the work on third down. He saw 10 targets himself today. But Darius Geis is I moved him into my top 30 running backs, and I think that he's a guy that you can start on a semi-consistent basis. Unfortunately, this game had good game script, and he still didn't really amount to much. It just kind of goes to show what the limits that an offense can do, especially when you're kind of the focal point for the defense, because I don't think you're really worried about Terry McLaurin. Did you see the tackling, by the way, on that Vernon Davis play?
Yes, I did. Yeah, Vernon Davis, by the way, 4 catches, 59 yards, and a touchdown.
Ugh, ugly.
Chiefs 40, Jaguars 26. We have basically broken this game down entirely earlier. Let's just very quickly touch on the Chiefs running back situation. Damian Williams, 13 carries for just 26 yards. He does add 6 catches for 39 yards, and he finds the end zone. Sean McCoy, meanwhile, 10 carries for 81 yards. Plus a catch for 12. Is this just going to be a timeshare here going forward?
Kind of looks like it. LeSean McCoy looked pretty good. He broke a 31-yard run. It looked like old Shady out there, but I've said it before. I'll say it again. Damian Williams on a short leash. Fortunately for him, they're going to be playing the Raiders next week, and that's a game that they should kind of have a free-for-all, especially knowing that Tyreek Hill is out of the lineup. I think they're going to be running the ball a ton. So you could probably start both LeSean McCoy and Damian Williams next week. Williams was also heavily used in the passing game, something that the same can't be said about McCoy. So even if Damian Williams moves into somewhat of a timeshare, I think he's the favored receiving option. And if Tyreek Hill is going to miss time, I think they can move Damian Williams around the formation a little bit. So he should carry value moving forward. But this definitely was a good game for the stock of Shady McCoy.
All right. Now, before we move on, I do want to tell you about another sponsor of today's show, ExpressVPN. Now, if you listened to this podcast last year, then you know that I'm a Jets fan living in New England. It is a miserable existence, made worse by my son frequently asking for help to put up his new Tom Brady fathead. And I used to subscribe to NFL Sunday Ticket so I could still watch the Jets games, but this year, thanks to ExpressVPN, I found a new, better, and far less expensive way to do that. So even without the ability to watch every NFL game at an insanely good price, ExpressVPN is really worth the minimal price it costs. It helps keep your network data encrypted, secure, and safe from hackers. And it comes with apps for computers and mobile and digital media players like Fire TV. But here is the best part. When you get ExpressVPN, you can buy the International Game Pass and stream any NFL game all season long for just $125. That is a fraction of the price of DIRECTV or NFL Sunday Ticket. ExpressVPN is fast, it costs less than $7 per month, and it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And of course, best of all, you can buy International Game Pass with it. Go to expressvpn.com/fantasypros. Find out how you can get 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/fantasypros for 3 months free with a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/fantasypros. All right, let's move on to the Rams 30, Panthers 27. We already broke down the running back situation. I don't really think there was much else on the Rams side of the ball here. I mean, the receivers do what they do. Woods gets 8 for 70, Kupp 7 for 46, Cooks 2 for 39. I mean, any takeaways here from the Rams side other than what we talked about with the running back?
No, there was a couple tough matchups for Woods and Cooks in this game. With Dante Jackson matches up really well against Brandon Cooks, whereas Robert Woods was matched up with James Bradbury. Kupp looked like he was healthy for the most part. He had 10 targets. I think on one drive he caught 4 balls. So it was a little disappointing for him considering the matchup he had. But on the other side of the ball was I think the biggest surprise. After all the hype we heard all offseason about Curtis Samuel, to see him get 4 targets in a game was disheartening. And I think It's something we probably should have expected, though, because he's been known as somewhat of a gadget player. He was like a hybrid wide receiver running back, that the way that they were going to expected to use him. But this was a game where I just felt like Cam Newton, with his limited mobility, was going to have to throw a little bit more. And he threw the ball 38 times. So to see Samuel with just 4 targets, that's really worrisome. And as for Cam Newton himself, he was someone I was down on this week, just because I felt like his mobility was going to be limited with that foot injury. I also think that with Christian McCaffrey being as good as running back as he is, and McCaffrey looks a lot bigger too. Like, he looks fantastic.
Yeah, you saw those pictures in the offseason, man. How much muscle he put on.
Oh, yeah, dude. He looks like the Hulk. But McCaffrey, he looks fantastic. He's breaking tackles. He looks really good. There's really no reason for Cam Newton to be the goal line running back, is what it comes down to. So losing that rushing upside, knowing that he's not like the world's greatest passer, Cam Newton is someone that I don't, some people are going to say, oh, don't overreact. I wasn't high on to begin with, and this definitely didn't help.
You still okay with DJ Moore, though? I mean, he gets 10 targets, 7 catches, 76 yards. He does lose a fumble, but pretty encouraging for him, right?
Yeah, and a tough matchup, too, because he's a more physical wide receiver than Curtis Samuel, and he was going to be matched up with Talib and Marcus Peters, so it was a tough matchup. So this was actually a really good outcome for DJ Moore.
All right, let's move on. Vikings 28, Falcons 12. I mean, the Vikings completely dominated this game. They led largely by their defense. I mean, Dalvin Cook, though, 21 carries, 111 yards. 2 touchdowns. We talked off season. I loved the addition of Kubiak and the zone blocking scheme. Is there much to say here about Cook other than he's a true stud?
Awesome. He looked awesome. He looked fantastic. And honestly, Alexander Madison looked awesome too. Like, there was not much difference when I saw those guys switch on the field. I was like, even with the hair and everything, like Madison looked really freaking good. And he was someone I moved up my board just because, I don't think we're always going to see 30 carries between those 2 running backs. I don't think that's going to happen every single week. But if something happened to Dalvin Cook, who, has been dealing with injuries over the first couple of years of his career, I think Alexander Madison fits this scheme really well too. And I think they kind of showed why they drafted him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I mean, he did look good. I really think if something happened to Cook, he would have enormous value right away. So he's not a bad guy to stash. Everything else for the Vikings offense, I think you kind of throw out. I mean, Cousins attempted just 10 passes here. So, I mean, I think we can probably just throw it out. Now, for the Falcons, I mean, I'm also kind of willing to throw it out. I don't know if you have a different perspective, just because I think the Vikings defense is so good, but you go ahead. I mean, Julio finds the end zone, which that's a new thing now, by the way, I guess, starting from the second half of last year. Oh, not a great game, only 31 yards, but he'll find the end zone now because that's what he does. Calvin Ridley finds the end zone. Austin Hooper catches all 9 of his targets for 77 yards. But any takeaways on the Atlanta side of the ball?
I had Matt Ryan as my QB 20 this week. I was really down on him because Minnesota last year, while in Minnesota, they didn't allow a single quarterback more than 12 fantasy points, and that included Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. So, when Matt Ryan was going into the 4th quarter with nothing to his name, basically, I was like, oh, this makes me look really smart. And then all of a sudden it's garbage time comes and Matt Ryan throws 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. Awesome. Thank you for that, fantasy gods. Because Matt Ryan had a bad game. He looked, the run game had nothing going for them. They just lost. Chris Lindstrom left this game injured. I don't know if he's going to miss some time. They're not going to be able to run the ball with the offensive line dealing with the injuries that they are. They've already had some injuries up front. So they're going to have to rely on the passing game. But I am actually buying. If you can buy low on Falcons players right now, I would do that because this is going to be a higher scoring offense. Knowing that they went into Minnesota, you shouldn't have been expecting much. So you should actually be pretty happy with Julio Jones, with Calvin Ridley, and Matt Ryan.
Well, what about the backfield, though? I mean, because that's another thing. Is this just a split? Devonta Freeman, 8 carries for 19 yards, and he fumbles. He does get 3 catches for 12 yards. Ito Smith, 6 carries for 31 yards. Plus 1 catch for 9 yards. I mean, are we just back in time here to Freeman? Is Ito Smith just taking the Tevin Coleman role or what?
No, I think Freeman is going to be the guy. I think it's going to be a bigger split than this game suggests. But every time that Freeman got the ball in this game, he had someone on his back and there was nothing he could do. This is another one of those games that I watched the whole thing. I mean it. There was nothing Devonta Freeman could have done in this game that would have changed the outcome because he was just every time, if he caught a ball, it was just there was someone on his back. If he handed off the ball, it's there's no room to run. Minnesota was swarming the ball, and there's going to be better days for Devonta Freeman, but the offensive line, the state of the offensive line, I should say, is a little bit worrisome. So we'll pay attention to the injury report.
All right, let's move to the 4 o'clock games, and I will remind you guys that Tags and I record this starting at roughly about 7 or 7:15, so these games are almost always still going on as we're recording, but they all, except for the Cardinals and Lions game, have wrapped up by now. So this one was the Seahawks 21 and the Bengals 20. I mean, this looks a lot like Seattle kind of from last year. Russell Wilson, 14 of 20 for 196 yards, but he does throw 2 touchdowns, 1 to Tyler Lockett, 1 to Chris Carson. Carson also doesn't run particularly well, 15 for 46. but he does get in the end zone also on the ground. And DK Metcalf, 4 catches on 6 targets for 89 yards. So what takeaways you got here on the Seattle side of the ball, if any, or is this just what you expected to see?
Yeah, there was a few takeaways, and one of the things, like I should mention, I do a Sunday morning show. I even put up a note on our Instagram account. If you guys aren't following Instagram, Instagram /FantasyPros, we're there. We're starting to post more and more things there, but I do a Sunday morning show, and I talked a lot about Chris Carson this morning, saying that I had him as my number 3 running back play on the week, and I also had Russell Wilson way down. I had him as my QB 19, and his ECR, I think, was QB7. So a lot of people liked him. And my concern I talked about in the live stream was that he would throw the ball 25 times or less. And we could look at a game that he has like 175 yards, 1 touchdown, maybe 2. And in today's NFL, that's not really that good for fantasy. And that's kind of what happened. But Chris Carson scores a couple touchdowns. I think the biggest disappointment in this game was Rashad Penny. 6 carries, 18 yards, nothing in the passing game.
Out of curiosity, what did you expect from Penny in this game?
I expected more carries on Seattle's side of the ball. So they ended up with 21 carries between those two. I was expecting like 35 carries. And
they didn't have the success running the ball, and it was close. The spread was 9.5, I believe. So, like you talked about, I think everyone, myself included, expected the Seahawks just to kind of roll over the Bengals and just run and run and run. But A, they didn't have that much success with it. And B, it wasn't in the game script. So I think that's, I guess, what got into it. But, to me, in terms of the split, 15 carries versus 6 for Penny, I mean, that's basically what I would expect in terms of the ratio between them. Isn't that for you?
Yeah, I would have. Yeah, that's basically, if I was expecting 35 plus carries, I would have expected Carson to have, 22 carries and then maybe like 13 to 15 for Penny. Like I was expecting a big volume game. But opposite of Matt LaFleur and opposite of Brian Flores, Zach Taylor's head coaching debut was a promising one. To know without AJ Green, Andy Dalton threw for 418 yards and 2 touchdowns is pretty remarkable. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. And it's one of those things like, so John Ross, so many people are going to write this off as like a fluke. And it's not to say that it's not. It might be. I mean, I like John Ross coming out of college, but I've said before and I'll say it again. Don't write off a player under one coaching staff. If you see, like, Marvin Lewis is not a guy that you wanted to rely on as a creative offensive play caller. We saw Robert Woods as one of the most inefficient wide receivers in football while he was with the Buffalo Bills. And then everybody's like, why would the Rams give Robert Woods a lot of money? Like, it was a priority of Sean McVay's when he first went there. And nobody knew why. And I think everybody's starting to see why. So I said, don't write off John Ross. And if he has a role planned for, like if Zach Taylor is going to use John Ross in that Brandon Cooks type role, it's going to have value. And Andy Dalton may not be, Jared Goff, but he proved to be competent today, and John Ross, he looked fantastic.
12 targets, 7 catches, 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a monster day that you can't entirely ignore. Just to switch gears here, Joe Mixon, just to point out, he did leave this game with an ankle injury. Early on, he only had 6 carries for 10 yards. We do not know the severity of it just yet. Giovanni Bernard does not do a ton without him. 7 carries for 21 yards. He does catch 2 passes for 42 yards. But Tags, where is Gio going to be rest of the season if Mixon's injury is going to keep him out for several weeks?
Man, it's really tough because like this was a game script that kind of was good for them. The Bengals were ahead or tied for a long time. Seattle won the game in the 4th quarter. So I don't think it's going to be a run-first offense. They're probably going to start to involve Travion Williams if Mixon had to miss time. But I would still say Giovanni Bernard would still be a low-end RB2, high-end RB3.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, they signed him to the extension, so, he's obviously the guy that they want to use him. So monitor that. Of course, we don't have the severity, but he left and did not return. Let's move on to the Chargers 30, Colts 24. Really entertaining game. It ends in overtime. I mean, yeah, Mike Williams leaves the game, I believe with a knee injury. I don't know how serious it was. He was on the sidelines, but you got to monitor that. But Austin Ekeler, 12 carries, 58 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches, 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. Melvin Gordon, who there's a report by Ian Rappaport that Gordon is now expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which, by the way, I throw completely out because Le'Veon Bell was expected to miss various weeks at various times. So I don't really care. But Gordon, of course, is probably not coming back, at least immediately. I mean, what are you doing with Austin Ekeler over the next couple of weeks? How high is he going to rank, would you think, next week.
I mean, I was actually moving Ekeler up my board as we went through because it was like we looked at the preseason usage and it was what it was. But then I went and looked back at last year and I kind of figured it out that it was going to be a 65-35, if not 70-30 split with Ekeler and Justin Jackson. And while Jackson looked really freaking good in this game too, like it's going to go like totally under the radar because Austin Ekeler scored 3 touchdowns, but Justin Jackson looked really good too. But Ekeler clearly is that guy. Rivers uses the running backs a lot in the passing game, and we saw Ekeler get targeted 7 times. So even if he's only getting, 12 to 14 carries per game, he's still going to get targets in the passing game. And Melvin Gordon, by the way, wasn't like a massive workhorse that some people think. He was a guy that I want to say that there wasn't a single game last year where he had 20 carries in a game. So it's very possible that while seeing 15 to 18 touches like Austin Ekeler is probably going to do, he could still post RB1 numbers. So it's like you have to look at the matchup. This was impressive because the Colts last year were one of the teams in the NFL who didn't allow a single 100-yard rushing game all year, but I knew that they struggled against pass-catching running backs, which is why I did like Ekeler this week. But yeah, man, I think you have to consider him an RB2 at minimum in this offense with the way that they're able to score points.
Absolutely. And with the way their offensive line, is dealing with injuries, Russell Okung is out, they need sort of that safety valve for Rivers to get out. So he certainly should be targeted a lot. The Colts, as I kind of expected, look more impressive on offense than I think people were giving them credit for. Brissett acquits himself well, 21 of 27 for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. Marlon Mack, you briefly touched on earlier, 25 carries, 174 yards and a touchdown. And T.Y. Hilton, 9 targets, 8 catches, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What do you want to say about the Indianapolis offense?
Yeah, I mean, T.Y. Hilton, big game, obviously, especially against the Chargers. Like, their secondary is legit. I know they're down Derwin James, but still, like, this is a crazy impressive game to post 887 and 2 on 9 targets for T.Y. Hilton. Like, wow. I think I'm selling based on like what I know because like that he's going to regress. Even with Andrew Luck, he's been a receiver that is more of like a high-end wide receiver 2 than he was a wide receiver 1. And Jacoby Brissett is definitely not an upgrade. I don't care what this game says. As for Marlon Mack, I talked about that on the live stream this morning too, saying if there's one player on the Colts that I don't really worry so much about, it's Marlon Mack because that offensive line is probably the best in the NFL. I would probably say they are the best in the NFL, and he broke a 63-yard run, which helped pump up the numbers a little bit. What's concerning is the fact that he wasn't targeted at all in the passing game. Like that's something that we had a concern about this offseason. It's the reason I talked about Mack and the fact that I thought he lacked upside to finish as like a top 10 running back this year because he's not used in the passing game. We saw Hines get targeted 4 times, but we didn't see anything for Mack. So that's my only concern, but clearly they're going to have him run the ball when they run the ball just 29 times with their running backs and he gets 25 of them, that's definitely worth a lot.
I mean, certainly selling high based on these performances for either Mack or Hilton, I'd be on board with, but I did not downgrade Hilton that much when Luck went down. I mean, I did, I think initially, and then when I looked at it, I feel like Brissett is comfortable in this offense. He's been there enough. It's a brilliant system. It's great coaching. It's a great offensive line. I think he's definitely going to be solid, but selling high based on this, sure. But overall, I certainly would not be in any way opposed to keeping either one of these guys as rock-solid players for your fantasy team for the rest of the season. 49ers 31, Bucs 17. Kind of a weird game. Tevin Coleman leaves this game with an injury. It's unclear how serious it is, but he did not return. Nobody really exciting. Raheem Mostert and Matt Breida kind of split the carries. Neither one. Mostert runs better. And Kittle, of course, has the Kittle game. But really, the receivers do absolutely nothing in this game. Dante Pettis, 1 catch for 7 yards. Marquise Goodwin, 1 catch for 7 yards. Deebo Samuel, 3 catches for 17 yards. I mean, what do you want to say here about the 49ers offense?
You can't play any wide receiver right now. This was arguably the best matchup in the NFL. The Bucs cornerbacks are terrible. So, I mean, obviously, Garoppolo struggling still a bit. I mean, 6.1 yards per attempt against this team is horrendous. Jameis Winston also had a terrible game. But I do want to remind everyone, though, like, because there's so many people jumping on Jameis right now. And, like, I had a lot of people in my mentions right before we jumped on the show saying, you and every other expert need to stop talking about Jameis Winston. He's not good at football and yada, yada. Okay, so if you're going to jump on Jameis Winston for his, 194-yard, 1 touchdown, 3 interception game, I also want to hear you say that you're going to drop Baker Mayfield. I also want to hear you say that you're going to pick up Andy Dalton. I want you to hear you say that you're going to pick up Case Keenum because they're studs. No, stop. Seriously. Like, guys, understand it's one friggin' week. And I know that the 49ers were really bad last year, but that front 7 has changed quite a bit. They have a few pass rushers that they acquired. I don't know if you've heard of them, but Bosa, Ford, Quan Alexander, I know he got ejected early in the game for a helmet-to-helmet, but that defense is a little bit different. Richard Sherman can still play. I think Jameis Winston will be fine. That defense is going to allow points as we kind of go through the season, so I don't panic on Jameis Winston. He was never a sure thing, and that's why he was falling in drafts as far as he was, but I'm not going to overreact to one game.
And I assume then that you're not going to overreact to Mike Evans with just 2 catches for 28 yards then, right?
Correct.
Okay. What about the backfield real quick for the Bucs? I mean, Peyton Barber runs okay, 8 carries for 33 yards, but Ronald Jones, 13 carries, 75 yards. I mean, is Ronald Jones going to wind up taking control a little bit of this backfield situation?
Ronald Jones is not Saquon Barkley, but he is a much higher upside running back than Peyton Barber in terms of what he can offer your offense. Like he can break big plays if you give him a hole. Like Peyton Barber is a guy like a Frank Gore where it's like he's going to be downhill, he's going to get what you block for him and not much more. Ronald Jones, if you give him a hole, he could break a long one. And we almost saw a touchdown. Like he got knocked out. I think it was like the 1 yard line where it arguably could have been called a touchdown. But Ronald Jones, he shows this burst that you've kind of hoped to see. And, even knowing he added weight this offseason and bulked up a little bit, you thought he might lose some of it. He still has it. I thought he looked really good. That offensive line is it's still bad. And that's going to limit it. But knowing that he's involved in the passing game a little bit, I mean, Ronald Jones is the one that I've said all along that I'd want to own because I think I know what Peyton Barber is. I don't think that he's someone that can help you win a fantasy championship or anything like that. But I thought Ronald Jones, going back to USC, we did see this guy score a ton of touchdowns there. And it's like if Bruce Arians is able to pull out some magic out of him, if there's someone that can do it, it's Bruce Arians. So it's like, we'll find out with Ronald Jones is what I said. And I was prepared to drop him after the first week if we saw nothing. But we did see something. We saw a guy that totaled 93 total yards and almost had a touchdown. So I'm going to hang on to him for now.
I'm really optimistic on this. I tried to snag him in the late rounds of pretty much every single one of my drafts because exactly what you said. It was a guy who you could drop without question if it got off to a bad start, but it didn't. And somebody's got to emerge there, and you know that Peyton Barber is just not the guy who's going to really show something. Ronald Jones has talent. We saw it in college. I think that he has a chance to really develop eventually into somebody who you're going to feel comfortable starting every week. Cowboys 35, Giants 17. Everybody on the Cowboys just does really well. Dak has a nice game, throws 4 touchdowns, 405 yards. Ezekiel Elliott gets kind of a minimal workload, splits exactly time, at least in terms of carries, with Tony Pollard. He gets 53 yards. He does find the end zone. Michael Gallup catches all 7 of his targets for 158 yards. Amari Cooper has 106 yards and finds the end zone. Randall Cobb finds the end zone. Jason Witten finds the end zone. Everybody finds the end zone. What do you want to say about the Cowboys here?
Kellen Moore, welcome to being the offensive coordinator. Jesus.
We
heard Michael Gallup, he was someone I paid attention to, and he's someone I liked this week because I thought Cooper would see shadow from Janoris Jenkins. They didn't really shadow him. So Cooper was able to do some damage, but Gallup, he's someone that people talked about, that he was the most improved player this offseason, and it showed. 7 targets, caught all of them for 158 yards. Gallup was someone I did like coming out of college quite a bit, but when Amari went there, it was like, how much can I really like him? If Kellen Moore can call an offense, man, watch out, because this Cowboys team has been so vanilla for so long that it's refreshing to see, 4 different players catch a touchdown here, and that doesn't even include Michael Gallup's 158 yards. So great first sign for Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator in Dallas.
Buy all your Cowboys is really what I would say. I loved Gallup as...
Oh, and Tony Pollard's not very good, by the way. I just want to throw that in there. Just that's a Bobby thing.
It was a me thing, Tags. That was my fault for starting that as well. So
you started it, but it was a Bobby beef with me.
That's what I like to do, actually. I like to start things and let you and Bobby fight them out. On the other side of the ball, Saquon has the big game, 11 carries for 120 yards. Evan Ingram, 14 targets, 11 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, is he going to... Well, I tell you what, forget about Ingram. Anybody who you want to talk about here on the Giants, for me, it was Ingram the guy who stood out, and really because of the 14 targets.
Like if you went through the splits with and without Odell Beckham and Evan Ingram, you already knew that he was going to have a big game. And knowing that Dallas, their cornerback trio, has been really good against wide receivers over the last 2 years, I loved Evan Ingram this week. He was my DFS cash game play, and while some other plays didn't work out, he was definitely one that I was extremely proud of. So. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything kind of shocking about the Giants offense today. They were missing pass catchers, so Sterling Shepard being the focal point, 7 targets, 6 catches, 42 yards. Yeah, it's fine, and I think that's exactly how we felt about him during the draft process, where he wasn't someone you were excited to draft, but he was a guy that you knew was going to get targeted. And Barkley, Didn't get it done in the goal line again. And this was something that he really struggled with the offseason. I did an offseason study based on where his targets and his carries took place in the field. Saquon Barkley was one of the worst in the league when it came to the red zone, and he struggled again today, and that's one of the reasons that I was struggling to take him number one over a Zeke or someone like an Alvin Kamara. Not because Saquon Barkley's not talented; he's the most talented running back in the NFL as far as I'm concerned, but the offense limitations and the lack of guys to take away the focus from someone like Barkley, it's a little concerning.
All right, let's get to our last game of the week, which is still going on. There's about a minute left in overtime right now. I've been hoping that it would end before the end of the show, but it is the Cardinals 27 and the Lions 27. The Cardinals are still driving here. Preparing the show notes, Kyler Murray looked absolutely abysmal in the first half, but he really turned it around in the second half. He's thrown for over 300 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns. He added 13 yards rushing. David Johnson looks pretty good. He finds the end zone through the passing game. Larry Fitzgerald, who is a guy who I loved and was snagging late in most of my leagues, 13 targets, 8 catches, 113 yards, and a touchdown. Thoughts here on the Arizona offense?
It was terrible for the first 3 quarters.
Really terrible, to the point where we said something before we got on here about how terrible Murray had looked, and then he's just really kind of turned it on here.
Yep, they've worn down that Lions defense, and now they're closing in. There's a minute left in overtime right now. It's 4th down for the Cardinals, but I am so excited. I'm so happy for Larry Fitzgerald. He was someone that I had ranked as a top 24 wide receiver play this week, and it was even in the featured pros thing where it went out in an email and everything, and I was like, early in the game, I was like, oh man, I bet the wrong thing. I'm like, man, Larry Fitzgerald he should be a safety blanket for Kyler Murray. And the more the game went on, I think the more Kyler Murray realized that. And so it was good to see him find him. As of right now, he has 8 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown on 13 targets. He was always a value in drafts, guys. He wasn't coming back to sit on the bench. Christian Kirk wasn't playing with the starters the entire preseason. Keyshawn Johnson's a rookie. Like, there's so many things here that just lead to Larry Fitzgerald production. So Larry Fitzgerald, don't sell high. Don't. He's actually going to be a guy that's going to be pretty stable for you as a wide receiver 3.
I completely agree. I have so many shares of Fitzgerald, and I kind of got made fun of every time I drafted him, I feel like. Maybe because my friends know how much I like him. But yeah, I agree. You can kind of throw out last year because it was Josh Rosen and a terrible offense. I think he's going to be really, really solid this year. On the other side of the ball, there may be a couple of more stats by the time this thing is done, but overall, Matt Stafford throws for 366 yards and 3 touchdowns. Kerryon Johnson doesn't do all that much on the ground, 16 for 50. TJ Hawkinson, 8 targets, 5 catches for 124 yards. Kenny Golladay finds the end zone. Danny Amendola finds the end zone. Any takeaways here from the Lions side of the ball?
Even more importantly, this is something else I talked about in the podcast, and it's something that none of us ever want to admit, but I said Danny Amendola is going to be involved in this offense more than people think, and I was saying it because you go back to Golden Tate, what he meant to Matthew Stafford in the offense, then you go literally when they got rid of Golden Tate, they brought in Bruce Ellington, a guy that was with the team for a couple days and then walks into double-digit targets. It was ridiculous. So knowing that Matt Patricia loves Danny Amendola, and tying back to the Patriots days, seeing him get 11 targets in this game is insane. Compared to Marvin Jones, who got 4 targets. So Hawkinson looking like the real deal, man. I was telling people I was okay if I missed on a rookie tight end because it's just a rare scenario where it happens. And granted, he's a guy that can block, so he's going to stay on the field. I was okay missing on him, but Jesus, if this keeps happening, I'm going to really regret it.
Yeah. He looked legitimate from all I've been watching. He's got a lot of talent, but you pointed out the problems with rookie tight ends. But for now, if he's available and you're struggling at your position, which you probably are, unless you have 5 or 6 guys, then he's not a bad guy to take a look at. Well, that's going to do it, Tags. We did it. We made it through. It was a good show, as always. I miss doing it with you. Thanks again to our sponsors, Pristine Auction. Just go to pristineauction.com, where they have a ton of daily auctions for pretty much every type of sports memorabilia. FanDuel, where you can win a ton of money and get a new team each and every week. And ExpressVPN, where you can keep your data secure and get access to every NFL game for the fraction of the cost of other sites. We'll be back on our regular schedule with Bobby and Tags for the rest of the week. Till then, enjoy the rest of your week 1 games, and I'll talk to you next week.